summer and over the period of the last 30 years, what we've been doing hasn't been the answer. Perhaps it's been helpful, but what we've been doing has not been the answer. And we can't just continue doing just the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3 decades and hope that eventually all these problems are going to disappear, because as I said earlier, the Labor Department has said that the problem is getting worse, not better. The unemployment rate of those living in the ghetto is not going down despite the poverty program, despite all of these other programs. The unemployment rate is going up. The educational system is not getting better. The housing is not getting better. The city of New York, we went from 420,000 dilapidated units to 540,000 dilapidated units since 1960. Now, I'm a Democrat and I support the Democratic administration. But the fact is that despite this legislation, we haven't moved in the right direction. I support a lot of this legislation. But I think that we have to use, find some different ideas, use some imagination. And it doesn't necessarily mean that what we've been doing for the last 30 years is necessarily correct.
It is by no means too imposing for the significance of the man welcomed to Berkeley. Out of Montgomery, Alabama, the first capital of the Confederacy, there has come to us and to the rest of the nation a man who strives not for division, but for unity among all men. Placing his faith in moral and spiritual power, this pastor has taught us as well as his parishioners, the force that is in passive resistance. Although harried by terrorism and by malevolent suit, by bigotry and by bombs, by writ and by threat, the Reverend King unflinchingly continued his policy of peaceful persuasion. It is of this that he will speak today. On behalf of the University of California, I am pleased and privileged to present this man, the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr.
The nonviolent resistor is just as opposed to the evil that he is standing against as the violent resistor. But he resists without violence. This method is passive physically, but dynamically active spiritually. It is non-aggressive physically, but strongly aggressive spiritually. Another thing that we had to get over concerning this method was the fact that the nonviolent resistor does not seek to humiliate or defeat the opponent, but to win his friendship and understanding. And this was always a cry that we had to set before the people, that our aim is not to defeat the white community, not to humiliate the white community, but to win the friendship of all of the persons who have perpetrated this system in the past. The end of violence or the aftermath of violence is bitterness. But the aftermath of nonviolence is reconciliation and the creation of the beloved community. And that is the type of thing that we are trying to get over. That a boycott is never an end within itself. It is merely a means to awaken a sense of shame within the oppressor, but the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. And then we had to make it clear also that the nonviolent resistor seeks to attack the evil system rather than individuals who happen to be caught up in the system. And this is why I say from time to time that the struggle in Montgomery, the struggle in the South, is not so much a tension between white people and Negro people. The attitude that the only way to ultimately change humanity and make for the society that we all long for is to keep love at the center of our lives. Now, people used to ask me from the beginning, what do you mean by love, and how is it that you can tell us to love those persons who seek to defeat us and those persons who stand against us? How can you love such persons? And I had to make it clear all along that love in its highest sense is not a sentimental sort of thing, not even an affectionate sort of thing. It's very interesting that the Greek language uses three words for love. It talks about eros. And eros is a sort of aesthetic love. Plato talks about it a great deal in his dialogues, a sort of yearning of the soul for the realm of the gods. It has come to us to be a sort of romantic love, and it stands with all of its beauty. We poets write about it and we read about it. I guess Shakespeare was thinking about eros when he said, "Love is not love which alters when its alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. It is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is a star to every wandering bark." You see, I can remember that because I used to quote it to my wife when we were courting. That's eros. That's eros. But when we speak of loving those who oppose us, we aren't talking about eros. The Greek language talks about philia, and this is a sort of reciprocal love between personal friends. And on this level, individuals love because they are loved. This is a type of love that we have for our close and intimate friends. This is a vital, valuable love. Now, when we talk about loving those who oppose you and those who seek to defeat you, we're not talking about eros or philia. The Greek language comes out with another word, and it calls it agape. Agape is more than eros. Agape is more than philia. Agape is understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. Biblical theologians would say it is the love of God working in the lives of men. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. And when we come to love on this level, we begin to love men not because they are likable, not because they do things that attract us, but because God loves them. And here we love the person who does the evil deed while hating the deed that the person does. And it is this type of love that stands at the center of the movement which we are trying to carry on. Now, I'm quite aware of the fact that there are persons who believe firmly in nonviolence who are not theists, who do not believe in a personal God. But I think every person who believes in nonviolent resistance believes somehow that the universe in some form is on the side of justice, and that there is something unfolding in the universe, whether one speaks of it as an unconscious process, or whether one speaks of it as some unmoved mover, or whether someone speaks of it as a personal God. That is something in the universe that unfolds toward justice. And so in Montgomery, we felt somehow that as we struggled, we had cosmic companionship. And this was one of the things that kept the people together, the belief that the universe is on the side of justice. That is something in this universe which justifies Carlyle in saying, "No lie can live forever." That is something in this universe which justifies William Cullen Bryant in saying, "Truth crushed to earth will rise again." That is something in this universe which justifies James Russell Lowell in saying, "Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown stands God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own." And that is the reason in Montgomery, Alabama, that we can walk and never get weary, because we know that is a great camp meeting in the promised land of freedom and justice. This, in short, is something of a story that could not possibly be told in a lecture, just mentioning some of the points that held us together and some of the basic philosophical presuppositions of this philosophy. And God grant that as men and women all over the world struggle against evil systems, that they will struggle with love in their hearts, with understanding goodwill. For this is a philosophy that says you must move on with wise restraint and calm reasonableness, but you must keep moving. And this is the challenge to America. We have a great opportunity to build here a great nation. a nation where all men live together as brothers and respect the dignity and worth of all human personality. And we must keep moving toward that goal. I know that some people are saying we must slow up. They're writing letters to the North, and they're appealing to white people of goodwill and to the Negro, saying, slow up, you're pushing too fast. They're saying we must adopt a policy of moderation. Now, if moderation means moving on with wise restraint and calm reasonableness, then moderation is a great virtue that all men of goodwill must seek to achieve in this tense period of transition. But if moderation means slowing up in the move for justice and capitulating to the whims and caprices of the guardians of a deadening status quo, then moderation is a tragic vice which all men of goodwill must condemn. We must continue to move on. Our self-respect is at stake. The prestige of our nation is at stake. And we must come to see that the issue of civil rights is not an ephemeral, evanescent, domestic issue which can be kicked about by vociferous politicians, but it is an eternal moral issue which may well determine the destiny of our civilization in the ideological struggle with communism. We must keep moving with wise restraint and love and the proper discipline and with dignity. I close now, but let me leave this with you. That is, within every academic discipline, certain technical words that soon become cliches and stereotypes. They become basic words in the vocabulary of that particular discipline. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in modern psychology. It is the word maladjusted. It is a ringing cry of the new child psychology, maladjusted. Now all of us should seek to live the well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. We should attempt as much as possible to be adjusted. But I leave you this afternoon saying that there are some things within our social order to which I'm proud to be maladjusted, and to which I call upon you to be maladjusted. I never intend to adjust myself to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to adjust myself to mob rule. I never intend to adjust myself to the tragic effects of the method of physical violence and to tragic militarism. And I call upon you to be maladjusted to such things. It may be that the salvation of our civilization lies in the hands of the maladjusted. I call upon you to be maladjusted as Amos, who in the midst of the injustices of his day could cry out in words that echo across the generations, let judgment run down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. As maladjusted as Abraham Lincoln, who had the vision to see that this nation could not exist half slave and half free. As maladjusted as Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery, could cry out in terms lifted to cosmic proportions, all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As maladjusted as Jesus of Nazareth, who dreamed a dream of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. God grant that we will be so maladjusted that we will be able to go out and change our world and our civilization. And then we will be able to move from the bleak and desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man to the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice.